Okay, so welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this webinar this afternoon. And we're going to be spending the next 30 minutes looking at Superwoman Syndrome and Workplace Stress for Women. And we've got today with us Alison Perks and Kay Edwin, who are going to be sharing this next 30 minutes with us. So we'll just have a quick look at who everybody is. So Alison is the co-founder of Find Your Wings. She's a brain-based coach with a background in psychology and change, and focus on supporting and guiding clients through change to enable and facilitate growth, developing insights that support change, creating new habits and behaviours. So if Alison just gives a little wave and a hello. There we go.
Hi, everyone.
And then Kay is Client Services Director at Freestyle. She's a mum of 2 young children and a fantastic, wonderful mentor on our team here at Find Your Wings. And she's amazing. So it's lovely to have you here on the call with us today. Thank you so much, Faye. Okay, sorry. My name is Kelly Worley, so I'm the co-founder of Find Your Wings and a mentor to people going through career transition. So I've got 20 years of experience in business and a passion for helping people find their path to a healthy career. Now, as you may be aware, it's Stress Awareness Month this month in April, and through the whole month we've been looking at different types of elements to do with workplace stress. And one of those is Superwoman Syndrome. So that's why we thought we'd bring you this webinar today. So we're going to kick off looking at what it is, and we'll have a little chat around it. So it comes from a lady called Marjorie Hasten-Shavitz, who created it in the 1980s, and it was under a book of the same name. And it basically describes women who feel pressurized to be able to do it all and work hard to fill multiple roles. So they feel they must show strength, that they must suppress emotions, that they need to resist any show of vulnerability or dependence on anybody else. They need to show a determination to succeed, even when there are things in their path, and they must help others. Now, I'm going to start to bring in Alison and Kay here. So do you guys recognise this definition of a Superwoman syndrome, and have you seen it yourself? So I'll go to Alison to start with.
Yes, definitely. I think from my perspective, from a psychological perspective, it's closely linked to imposter syndrome, which is where you experience self-doubt, lots of other challenges around criticising yourself in terms of what you do and how you do it, especially more seen by women in tech and women in science roles, who feel, maybe women who are in more male dominated roles, who start to feel that they are, well, they start to believe basically that they are inferior in some way, and that it's not the case. It's more about self-doubt and self-belief rather than actual capability and capacity. From my own experience, I think I've experienced some of the characteristics that can be displayed, especially around attributing my success to somebody else or other external influences. It's, I didn't do it, everybody else did it kind of thing. And then, critically analysing what I do continually, still do that all the time, as I'm sure we all do. Being a busy mum of 3, and having the challenges that we have around, having to have everything ready for the children, for all of that they need, and then everything that we need, everything that the house needs. It tends to be women who do take on more of those roles, more and more. And again, especially it's experienced when you are working full-time, managing a house, managing the children, and it tends to be more in that area really, or working part-time, working in general and managing everything else that you need to manage.
Definitely. Okay. No, that's really interesting. So Kay, what about from your experience? Is this something that you recognise that you've seen as well?
Yeah, I can absolutely echo what Alison said. I've absolutely suffered with it in the past and see other people in our organisation who have with it and are suffering with it. So role in 4 days. Luckily, I work for a really flexible business, but I know a lot of people don't. And I run a family, as Alison says, and it's all the commitments that you have inside of work, outside of work. And also there's a pressure to succeed in some way. If people want to progress up the career ladder, then you kind of have to take on multiple hats. And I think women by default just say yes and get the job done. And they always say, you know, if you want something done, give it to I'm not male bashing, but give it to a woman or a mum and it'll get done. And I think we were our own worst enemy sometimes. But particularly with my role at Freestyle now, I'm able to recognise it in other colleagues and actually offer a line of support and working out ways which we can navigate it together, because it's a horrible place to be. And I think one thing is interesting. A lot of people sometimes say, oh, wow, you're Superwoman. And I think that's the worst term, because it puts so much pressure on the individual to carry on being this superhero when it's anything but.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, that it's sometimes seen almost as a compliment, and yet the weight that carries with it can be quite significant. And it's interesting that you mentioned about how we support colleagues, because we're going to come on to that at the end. So keep that in your mind, or I'll bring you back in a little while. But it's interesting actually that the research backs this up as well. So it's not just this lady who's invented this phrase, but actually some work that McKinsey has done in the last couple of years, and they did their Women in Workplace report, and it came up with that 20% of the women in this report said that they are often felt to be the only person in their gender in the room, or a very few, and it left this feeling of being the only one. And I think when you're the only one in any situation, it means that you feel pressure to take on more, you don't want help, you ignore your emotions because you want to be taken seriously, and you almost feel that weight of everybody else who is in that category that you sit in on your shoulders, because you feel that you're representing them. And I just wonder, you know, taking into account that the definition we saw and this idea of being the only one, Alison, are there any sort of psychological impacts from Superwoman syndrome, as we're calling it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, they're very closely linked to stress. So I think, you know, the more you take on, the more you do. The more you try to be a perfectionist, the more you try to get everything right, that adds, you know, it adds to stress. And I think the psychological impacts of stress can manifest both in your health and your well-being, if you're not taking care of yourself. But there can be physical attributes, you know, high blood pressure, you know, overeating, undereating, all of the things that are associated with that, self-medicating, you know, those things that are attributed to stress. I think again, then there's the, you know, the kind of the non-physical attributes, so the kind of the perception of yourself, you know, your moods and your perception of yourself in the workplace, your perception of yourself with others, either at home or in the office. I think there's the psychological impacts can manifest itself in many ways. I think the physical ones are probably more challenging to deal with, because once they get hold of you, it can be quite a hard habit to break. You know, if you are in that habit of going home and opening the bottle of wine in the evening to relax, you know, if you are in the habit of going home and kind of slumping on the sofa and watch whatever it takes for you to, you know, to kind of feel that you're getting some kind of release. And I think, you know, the work that we do is kind of really important in understanding how you can look at those habits if you want to, and change them and focus on more positive habits that will alleviate the stress that you have, and also enable you to have and take better care of yourself. I think that's the thing that
around that idea of habits and how, you know, how habits happen, and so how we can kind of break them down and try to change them, because that could be quite important.
Yeah, I think, you know, your brain is hardwired to take the easy route. That's what it does. It's really great. It's an amazing tool. But you know, you're hardwired. Once you've learned a habit, it's hardwired. It's in there. It never goes away. So whatever habit you have changed or improved or broken, you know, it will still be there. But what you can do is rewire those habits. You can rewire your brain to think differently or to do different things different ways. And it's usually, you know, you replace one with another. So, you know, simple example of taking up exercise, if you can, and replacing, you know, that to help you feel better, or mindfulness or yoga or whatever it is, whatever you feel comfortable doing, you can do that. I think your brain also likes to, you know, without getting too technical, there's, you know, your prefrontal cortex is what you need to operate on a daily basis. And if it's busy because you're in stress mode, and you're, you know, once you're in stress mode, your body reacts the same way to you know, to any kind of stress. It's fight or flight, whether that's stress from, you know, thinking about a different solution, or stress from something really traumatic in your life. Your body reacts the same way. And if you're in fight or flight mode, your prefrontal cortex is busy, and it stops your rational thinking. It puts you in the thinking mode where you are continually, you know, on a loop. Whereas if you have the time and space to slow down that part of your brain and use it the way that you want to use it, it will think of the solutions, it will come up with the ideas, it will give you what you need, in a very, you know, a very short way of explaining it. But that's kind of the best thing to do. I think if you can understand that a little bit more about yourself as well, that will help in terms of alleviating some of the challenges that come around Superwoman syndrome.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. It makes a lot of sense. Kay, when we're thinking about this kind of only one scenario, how do you feel that could be detrimental in a workplace? So not even if we almost take the, you know, the personal feelings out of it, if a workplace is looking to try to stop this or address it, or if somebody's brought it to their attention, why should they be worried about this?
I think the only one syndrome it's incredibly detrimental, because you're not getting the best out of that individual. They're very much blinkered and working at what they feel is a pace rate that's too fast for anybody. I think half the battle is also getting that individual to what they're bearing, and also the language that you use around that. Quite often, I know, especially when I didn't want people to say, how can I help you? But if someone said, what can I take off your plate, or how can I support you? I found that to be a lot more valuable. There's a lot of pride in women who kind of, I think, fit in this bracket, in the only one bracket, or the Superwoman syndrome bracket, and a huge sense of failure if they drop one of the spinning plates. But like Alison said, if you can get into the habit of rethinking how your brain is wired, and also I think, especially with some of the girls that I mentor myself, I kind of say, what's the worst that can happen if you do finish and close your laptop by 5:30? What is the worst that can happen? Clients are understanding. People are generally understanding. If you've got commitments and other things to do, then you don't have to fit everything into the 24-hour period that we all work to. So I think businesses need to take stock and recognise, but also understand that it's not just a quick fix. It's a longer journey, but I think in turn they'll be rewarded in terms of that individual's loyalty to the business. It goes above and beyond pay benefits and beer fridges. It's investing in someone's mental health, I think, which is an investment that people can't afford not to move ahead with.
No, absolutely. I think you're right there. And I think it's one of those things that if a business ignores it kind of at their peril almost, because if you have somebody that feels in this situation that they are the only one, then like you say, they're not going to go out there and necessarily ask for help. It does need everybody in the business, you know, even yourself when you're in a business, it needs you to be aware and just to be looking out for these signals. And like you said, Kay, offer that supporting hand.
Absolutely.
Even ask the question, you know, if there's anything they can help with. I mean, I know you two, you know, we all kind of work together, and have you got any sort of examples of the route that somebody might take and how that might look to somebody who might go from this feeling of feeling lost, feeling very overwhelmed, feeling like they can't go and ask for any support, maybe through to something more positive? Alison, I'll come back to you.
From my perspective, I think that's really the really important thing, as Kay says, is to you know, be a little bit vulnerable and ask for help. You know, it's not failure. It's actually really brave to ask for help. And I think until, you know, we start to change our behaviours in that way, and we do start to ask for help, I think that's really important. I think when you do make that big step and you do, you know, recognise that actually you want some support, you want some help, it's then what do you do about that, and how do you go about getting that help, and what help is it, you know, will work for you. And I think that's the important thing. You know, you can work with coaches and mentors to develop those solutions. And I think we've got some experience of where we've seen, you know, massive, huge change in people's belief in themselves You know, one of the big characteristics of this is self-doubt, and it can actually be self-sabotage, you know, at its worst. And that is when, you know, I've worked with some people who have seriously taken a long time to change, but they have changed, and it's taken a long time to move away from those habits. But if you continue to support yourself and continue to get what you need, then that makes a massive difference. I think it's not a short-term quick win kind of solution. It's something that I think we all need to recognise and we all take on board, especially over a longer term period, not just a short term kind of like quick fix. It's not going to help. It will need a longer term, and it takes conversation. It takes, you know, insights, giving you the time and space to think for yourself. I mean, coaching is not somebody telling you what to do or giving you the solution. Coaching is actually about you developing your own solutions because you have it within you to do that. Coaching is about giving you the time and space to do that. And then moving into, you know, mentoring. Kay, I guess from your perspective, how can we, you know, we link the two very closely, don't we?
Absolutely, yeah. We kind of do a semi handover in sorts, and especially with one lady that I'm working with, an amazing individual, absolutely amazing, and taking on an awful lot. But also then we got to a point where we split week by week, split her tasks. So we had one in a box for health, a box for career, a box for her children, and a box for herself. And she picked maybe 2 things in each of those boxes to achieve by the next time we caught up. And then suddenly this huge to-do list or sense of failure was actually pre-planned, and then she could have that sense of progression without feeling like she had to take on the world. And that was really effective, very simple but very effective. But also the biggest or the hardest thing to do was what she puts in her box, what's her passion. And quite often we put ourselves last, and I think Superwomen, and the only one people who fit in this category, will put themselves last and everybody else above them. So I think also working out how do I put myself first, and I'm putting everyone else's needs there too, but where do I sit? And I think businesses, going back to your earlier question, Kelly, need to do 2 things, especially when they're giving out work, is to check on people's capacity. So where are you at? How much can you take on? And also really setting the example. So if you're working under a senior leader who's sending emails all evening and working all weekend, then there is a muted expectation that you do the same. And I regularly say to my team, I don't mind if you're working in the evening, if that's the best time for you, but schedule those emails to go out during the working day, because I'm very much keen on the mental health of our team and our business, and we're a better business because of that. So I think there's multiple ways that businesses can look after those individuals, but it's got to be set by the example at the top.
Yeah, and that's a brilliant point, Kay, and I think that's so key, because I think so many people, you know, if you are not the head of the organization, normally there is normally people around you and above you, and people who work for you as well, and you have to live that expectation, don't you? You have to be the example, but also flag it to people who are more senior, and you know, they may not be aware of the behavior that their impact is having. And if you can have that conversation with people, I think, you know, bringing that awareness round and helping people to see the impact that their own behaviour is having on those around them, and potentially the whole culture of the organisation, depending on who the individual is really important. Just looking at some really practical things around what we could do, either if you feel yourself in that situation, and then we'll move on if you see somebody in your workplace who is kind of going through this kind of situation. So if you see it in a colleague, then when we talked before, we've talked about there kind of being 3 areas that we can work on, and one of the sort of work for both examples really, but it's about talking and supporting and then reviewing, and if we're looking at doing it for somebody who is not yourself, so for a colleague, Alison, I don't know if maybe you'd like to talk around a little bit around each of those and how those would work if you know, for people to help others in the workplace.
Yeah, I think so. In terms of recognizing it in others, it's if you're seeing somebody's behaviors changing, if you're seeing somebody who's usually, you know, happy and on it and, you know, enthusiastic, if you see that change, and if you see somebody, you know, we tend to look overwhelmed when we are overwhelmed. It's very difficult to hide it. It will come out, and it either comes out in your behavior, and you know, that could be you know, a kind of aggressive behavior. It could be sort of distancing yourself. It could be withdrawing. And if you're seeing that, I think the first thing to do is to talk to them about it and ask, is that, you know, are they okay? I think sometimes, you know, we tend to not ask. We tend to just think, oh, they'll be all right, they'll be all right. And actually, you know, if somebody does say to you, I know myself when I've been in those situations, as someone said to me, are you okay? I've kind of brushed it off. But if they've asked again, I've kind of gone, you know what? No, I'm not. And sometimes that makes a massive difference. I mentioned being vulnerable earlier. I think it's really something that I'm very passionate about. Vulnerability is not a weakness. It's a strength. And until we start to recognize that and start to believe it, asking for help and getting support makes you more successful, and it makes you happier, and it makes your life easier. And I think that, you know, those are things that we all want on a daily basis. Absolutely. So I think, again, the support element of that, and support is different for different people. You know, it could be as simple as Kay says, is working down and sitting down and saying, okay, what 2 tasks am I going to do this week? And sort of celebrating the success of that, rather than, you know, living in the misery of not doing everything on that to-do list. And then in terms of reviewing, I guess it's more about you yourself continually reviewing what you need and what works for you. And it could be intense at the beginning, but it could then move on to being something that is, you know, less regular, more of an informal kind of approach to catching up with somebody and asking how it's going. It could be as informal as that. But yeah, or it could be a structured kind of program, whatever is working for that individual, really.
Yeah, okay. And Kay, just maybe from a workplace perspective, from the employer's perspective, how do you think they could use these 3 areas to try to help somebody or help prevent this really in the
I think when Alison said about being vulnerable, it's a huge positive in someone's characteristics or their character traits. I think offering the ability to actually talk to that individual may suit some, but it also may not suit others, because they might not want to share the content of their stresses and strains with someone inside the business. And I know, obviously, through the Find Your Wings mentorship scheme that I'm part of, I know the women that I speak to are quite grateful to speak to someone outside of their business, their friendship group, their family group, and that is a benefit, because we may never meet in person, but at least you can offload to someone who gets it and who understands. And I think, unfortunately, there's no quick fix, but I do think it's a lot of talking, a lot of support, and a lot of checking in and patience from both sides, I think, on that part. But I think the first step is just acknowledging and recognizing these individuals, and I think that's the first step in every case.
I totally agree and echo all of that you said. I think those are great points. I think as well, we have to make a point that it is a commitment. You know, it's a commitment from the business in terms of the culture that they want to have within that business, in terms of retaining employees, employment strategies, all this kind of thing. It's important that a business can talk really positively in this way. It's a massive selling point for them if they can say that our culture is supportive in this way, and we make sure that communication is open, we allow for transparency, and we allow people to go outside and get external support if that's what they need, then that's a huge benefit to them. And then obviously from a personal point of view, if you are committed to checking in with yourself and recognizing your own points of stress, and if you're quite liable to take on this Superwoman sort of guise, if you like, and put on the cape and go out there and fight crime on everybody's behalf, then you'll know that in yourself. I think we all know if we have a tendency to do that, and being aware of that and recognizing what your own triggers are, and being able to say, hang on a minute, I've missed this event, or this thing that I'm always really prepared for, I didn't do this time. Like, why was that? I think I've just got too much on my plate, and actually stopping and doing something about it, I think, is really valuable. Right, a couple of just final closing sort of comments from you both around any of this. So I'll come to Alison first.
I think, as I said earlier, the most important part is to just start. If you are feeling overwhelmed, and if you are feeling, and it is getting to a point where you are in that position where you're self-sabotaging, then or self-doubt even, it's to just reach out and talk to someone, you know, whoever that may be. As Kay says, it may be someone close to you, it may be someone who's not close to you, and that might work for you. I think take the first step, reach out, and it will be, you know, that will feel like a relief.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Kay?
I'd say make it your business to check in on everybody in your team, even if they're not on your team, in your wider business, and just, as Alison said, ask if they're okay. And then again, and really look out for one another in that regard. But I also think if you're in a business and you're in a leadership position, you need to set an example that people follow. I think that is key for leading agency culture. And I think the impact and ramifications that has then on people in your business is paramount. So they would probably be my top two.
Brilliant. No, that's great. Thank you so much. And there are lots of other, you know, supporting bits of information and blog posts and things on our website as well, particularly around this stress awareness month theme. So please go over to our website and have a look. And, you know, we're all here. Our contact details are there. You know, we'd love to speak to people if you need some of that help. We're here. So thank you so much to everybody. Thank you today for Kay and Alison for joining us, and we're back on tomorrow on a slightly different theme around the neurological and psychological impacts of stress and what we can do about those. So hopefully you'll be able to join us with that, but thank you very much. And I will stop the recording.